The Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Michael Gilday, says the Navy can't get to its 355-ship goal with the budget it has now. He told the House Armed Services Committee 305 ships is the most it can support today. Captain Jerry Hendrix, U.S. Navy, retired as Vice President of the Telemus Group. He's former Director of the Naval History and Heritage Command. Jerry, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. I thought of you this week as I listened to a conversation about World War II and the Navy fleet. 6,200 ships during World War II, and we're talking about 355 today. Welcome, Jerry.
It's good to be here. And yes, I mean, that number is kind of astounding when you think about this historically, that, we started the war around 400 ships. And then in a 5-year period of time, we ramped up to over 6,000 ships. And we stayed essentially around 1,000 ships for the better part of the next 30 years. It wasn't until after the Cold War that we actually dipped below 600, then got down below 300 just a couple decades later. So it really is quite amazing at how large the Navy was at the end of the Second World War.
You're writing in the National Review under the title, Why America Must Be a Sea Power, and you write this about that subject. We'll need a Navy battle force of around 450 ships. We can accomplish it along two paths, building new ships and extending the lives of the ships that we already have. What's the holdup to doing that in the short kind of time frame that you just alluded to, Jerry? We're only trying to get from about 290 to, you propose, 450 and we're talking about 10 to 30 years.
So, I mean, the problem right now is capacity, and it's capacity on two sides. One is a capacity issue with shipbuilding. If you really look at our ship building yards right now, we're pretty much maxed out so far as how much work that they can handle, given the number of trained personnel that they have there. And so, we're trying to build 2 fast attack submarines a year, and we're trying to cut in the Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine into that production. That's going to be a challenge in our submarine base. And we're also building 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers per year, and that's a challenge for those 2 yards right now based upon their schedule, the budgets that they have, and the number of personnel you have. So if we actually asked all of them to build more, they're going to be hard-pressed. Now, fortunately, we are looking at getting the new frigate program coming online here in the next few years and get some frigates in the water starting in the mid-2020s. But from shipbuilding, we're hard-pressed based upon capacity. Same thing with ship repair. So if I wanted to extend the lives of my Ticonderoga-class cruisers or my Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, which are approaching their retirement ages, we don't have as much capacity in ship repair. So if I wanted to put them in for repair or modernization, I need to start doing long lead investments in the floating dry docks and the dry docks that I have around the nation now in order to get them prepared with the right number of workers. This is a long lead strategic problem, which is why I called in my essay that the nation needs to make up its mind whether it wants to be a land power or a sea power and make the appropriate investments from a strategic sense. I think we should be a sea power based upon the threats that we're facing from China and Russia.
And I imagine our friends in the Coast Guard, as you talk about the programs that are necessary in the Navy, are saying, don't forget about us, the Polar Security Cutter, and others. You begin this piece in what I always enjoy about your work, a provocative way, to retain its leading position within the global system. The United States should make a conscious decision to pivot back to being a sea power. The inference there, Jerry, is that we pivoted away from being a sea power and we're not today. Am I reading too much into your words?
No, you're not reading too much in. In fact, I think that the nation began to stray from being a sea power, which was what it was when it was founded. The founding fathers, specifically coded it into the Constitution that we should provide and maintain a Navy, but only raise and support an Army, meaning it looked at land power as an episodic requirement, whereas the Navy was a persistent requirement that needed to be maintained. But obviously the 19th century and then the 20th century with the 2 overseas world wars, we became sort of continental in our viewpoint. But now because of where we're at in the world, specifically because of the threats, I think we need to step back, reassess where we're at, and make the decision and then sort of return to the wisdom of the founders. I think that sea power and a sea power strategy is the most appropriate way for us to deal with the competitive strategic environment we find ourselves in today, which is not to say that we do away with the land component. I think it's just a prioritization that we actually look at the Navy, and then Air Force, the forces that operate in the global commons. And then you look at the Army behind that, but we need to prioritize based upon our strategic challenges.
Given the threat landscape that you just outlined, great power competition and so on, it sounds to me like you believe we still have an edge that other people think we may have lost. You write, the world we've created is not the world that China and Russia wish to live in. Does that hold true still when we talk about the South China Sea, when we talk about the Arctic and so on? You and I have had many discussions about both places, and I wonder if we still maintain the edge that it sounds like you think we have or had.
Well, I do believe that we have an edge in terms of capabilities. I think that our ships, although we have fewer ships than the Chinese Navy does right now, that the ships that we do have are on a capability basis better than the Chinese ships. I also think our submarines are more capable than either the Chinese or the Russian submarines. But what we're seeing is both China and Russia are looking at the waters near them, the Arctic Ocean for Russia, South China Sea and East China Sea for China, as additional buffer space. Both of these powers are continental powers. They tend to view the acquisition of land as a means of creating additional security barriers around their central strategic core. Now they're turning to the ocean, largely because they fear not only the ideas, they fear the ideas that come across the sea, the idea like free trade and the free sea. That's not exactly in line with their views of the world. And they want to have control of that, both for protection as well as asserting sort of an expanding control of the global system. And that's where we need to push back. And I think the Navy is best placed to do that.
If we take all of that to be the case, Jerry, what's the timeline look like for us to maintain that edge? And what are the steps to take other than just building more ships and building more shipyard capacity and building more people who are able to build those ships? What else do we have and how much time do we have, Jerry?
We don't have much time. In fact, after Admiral Davidson's sort of farewell testimony in front of the Armed Services Committees, where he said that he felt there was a chance of a Chinese movement against Taiwan within the next 6 years, I think that sort of sets the window. In fact, I'm greatly concerned that that window is actually closer to us, that the Chinese might move against our interest in the Western Pacific. So I actually come to the words of Representative Elaine Luria, who recently said we need to stop thinking about Battle Force 2040 and think about Battle Force 2025, which really gets at not only how many ships can I build that are new, but how many ships that I presently have can I extend their lives? So looking at the extension of the Ticonderoga class cruisers to do a ship-by-ship assessment of them to find out which ones we can preserve. And the same thing with the Flight 1 Arleigh Burkes that are coming up for retirement. We probably need a close look at that. If we really want to grow the Navy, it's going to have to be a two-path method, one by building new and the other is by extending the lives of the ships that we already have.
Jerry Hendrix, thanks for coming back on. I appreciate your time as always.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Francis.